she was a Christian, and she seemed like a pretty serious one. Not that she wasn't telling me, she wasn't witnessing to me or anything. She was really consistent, just in the things she said and did. And I just noticed it. And I asked her, well, what kind of Christian are you? I mean, you're a Christian, but are you a Methodist? Are you a Catholic? What are you? And she said, well, she says, if I have to pin myself down, I'd call myself a born-again believer, follower of Christ. And then I didn't say this out loud, but in my mind I'm thinking, whoa, you're one of those. Even though I didn't believe what she believed, I knew without a doubt that she believed it. And that impressed me, that she really believed what she said. And that made an impression on me. He would always say grace at every meal. No matter who was around, how many people, how loud it was, whatever was going on, he would always stop and say grace. And I noticed that it was a little thing, but it caught my attention. It didn't matter where he was, who he was with. That's when I prayed to receive Christ, was in this pastor's car in the parking lot while my friend was in an interview. I read through John 3:16, which we all know, for God so loved the world that he sent his only son. But then it says, that God didn't send his son to condemn the world, but to save it. But then it goes on and says, but those who have not believed are already condemned, for because they have not believed in God's one and only Son. And right then and there, in that car, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm already condemned because I haven't believed. Not that I'm going to be condemned, I'm already condemned. And that really hit me. And so I was by myself sitting in the car, and I prayed and asked God to forgive me and to come into my life. I was sitting in there doing my laundry, and this guy starts talking to me, older gentleman, and he's witnessing to me, basically, is what he's doing. He's telling me about something that they're going to have at this church, and he was answering questions that I hadn't asked. It was just a real affirmation to me. Like, I felt like here I had these questions, and God sent this guy that I didn't know to answer these for me. This is Don Reynolds, Pastor Steve's father-in-law. I didn't know Pastor Steve. I didn't know, anybody, but that's who it was. And then I told my friend Bruce, who had driven me about, that I had prayed to receive Christ, and then I told him about running into this guy in the laundromat. And he said, you ought to write and tell that guy, because the guy he had given me a business card, though. He's a book salesman, textbooks, I think. So just so I had something with his name. And so I wrote him a letter and told him what an impact that he had on me. And he kept that letter on a bulletin board at home, which I didn't know. And Steve told me when Don passed away, they gave that letter back to me. So I've got it in my Bible. My friend Mike, who passed away a few weeks ago, at lunchtime we were talking, and he was talking about how the Lord was helping him because he had a lot of health problems in the past year, and sometimes he'd get depressed and things, and how God was using all these things to draw him nearer to himself. And we were saying, talking about how God grows us through hardship and adversity. We don't really grow when things are going great. We all like it to go smooth. I mean, I would love it if everything went smooth. But we don't really grow too much when it's like that. But Mike said that, he goes, sometimes I've felt like, in the past, like God had abandoned me, or, he wasn't near. And he goes, I know that he's always near. I'm the one that drifts away. That's what Mike said. I'm the one that drifts away. God's always close and always there for me. I'm just the one that drifts off. And that's true about all of us. So I think it's, the more we stay, the nearer we stay to God, stay in His Word and draw near to Him, we draw near to each other and to others. And we can see opportunities. God opens our eyes to things maybe that we didn't see before. So I did at work this is quite a few years ago, I was saying, I wrote out a testimony. I wrote a little email and I attached this testimony of my personal testimony, and I said, I don't remember what exactly I wrote, but I go, I said something about Easter's coming, and I said, I've attached my testimony of what Easter means to me and how I came to Christ, if you're interested, in reading it. And then I emailed it to 300 and some people. And I got some positive feedback from some people and some very negative feedback from some people. They didn't have an email policy then, but they implemented one after that about what you could send out and what you couldn't. I didn't violate any policies because they didn't have one, but I guess I caused them to write one. So I was at home. I was getting ready to go to work, and God told me, not in an audible voice, but felt His Spirit say to me, take a Bible to work for this gal. And there's a couple people on break, and she was one of them. And I had my Bible, and I was reading. One guy was reading the newspaper, and it was just the typical routine. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm really blowing this. God told me to bring this Bible to give this gal, but I don't know how to say anything. I don't know what to say or what to do. And I'm sitting there fretting, and she turns to me and she goes, I really need to get a Bible. And I was just like, oh my gosh. I just about fell out of my chair. And I was like, well, you know what? It's interesting because I just felt like I was supposed to bring one for you today. I remember she'd be telling me some different problems, and sometimes I'd quote some scripture that I thought was applicable. And I remember her one time turning to me and saying, well, what does that have to do with anything? And I thought, well, I guess to her it doesn't have anything to do with anything. In trying to witness to my dad, I had written him a letter one time. I thought, I'm going to ask this gal to read this letter, take it home over the weekend and read it, and tell her, I told her what I was doing. I was writing this letter to my dad, telling him about the Lord, and if she would just read it and see if she found it to be offensive in any way or things that he might be offended. Well, she took it home, and she came back after the weekend, and she's like, no, this is not offensive at all. And, I'd send it and stuff. And then a few days later, she said, that letter? She goes, I didn't tell you this, but that letter made me really think and pray. I prayed and asked God to come into my life.
I'm coming home, I'm coming home. I'm coming home to the ones I